Hello, hello, welcome in. Welcome YouTube, Twitch, and TikTok. It is almost birthday week, and hello. It is the final reading of this week before my husband's birthday this weekend and mine next week. It's so good to see you all. It's been a productive day. How has your day been? Have you had something to eat? Have you had water? Have you eaten something? No. Have you taken your meds? That one. Yeah. Have you taken your meds, eaten something, had water? Have you said something kind about yourself today? If you have not done any of those things, please do so. Not necessarily in that order, but yeah. It is a lovely, lovely evening. It's been a hot day, and I'm relieved that we've had quite a successful protest outside the Goodman Gallery. Most of those things, it's good enough. We've done. I've also done most of those things. The one thing that I said that was kind about myself today is that I've done the work and I've kept my integrity. I've held on to my values in doing that work. Because we went to the Goodman Gallery today. So I can actually tell you what... Thank you so much. So the reason that we were at the Goodman Gallery today is because our arts and culture minister, who is from a party called the Patriotic Alliance, cancelled the appointing of Gabrielle Goliath, an artist whose work called Eulogy went through a rigorous selection process for the Venice Biennale celebration of art, essentially. She was chosen to represent South Africa, and Gayton McKenzie, who is the Minister of Sports, Art and Culture, intervened to cancel her participation in the Biennale. And he didn't simply withdraw funding, he overrode this curatorial process. A government minister is not supposed to be able to do that. But he asserted political control in support of Israel. And we know that the Patriotic Alliance is a party that supports Israel. And in doing so, supports apartheid. So... yeah, Gayton McKenzie did that as the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture. And he basically decided, what kind of art is acceptable to represent the country and what art isn't acceptable to represent the country. And that, to me, is censorship. That to all of us. If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it goose steps like a Nazi. That is supported the Israeli state. But over and above that, the Goodman Gallery in Johannesburg chose to comply with it, to comply with that decision, and cancelled their partnership, their relationship with Gabrielle Goliath as well. Eulogy, as an exhibition, honors the lives lost to gender-based violence and femicide in South Africa, and honors the lives of people who have been killed by colonial violence in the Namibian genocide and state violence from Israel towards the Palestinians. Eulogy links these genocides together. The femicide, the past genocide of the people of Namibia, and the current genocide going on in Palestine, linking them, rightfully so, because they're all forms of violence that is state sanctioned. In our government not doing anything positive to end the war on women's bodies, and with our femicide rate being so high, it is state sanctioned violence against women and femmes. And this is why all of these are interconnected, because it is a form of patriarchal, colonial, white supremacist, capitalist violence. And Eulogy also honors the life of a Palestinian poet who was killed by Israel, named Hiba Abu Nada. And so today we stood outside the Goodman Gallery and we protested. We protested the censorship of artistic expression. We stood with the Goodman Gallery years ago when they chose to exhibit a piece called The Spear, which was Jacob Zuma, after his rape trial and getting away with a whole lot of shit as president of the country, subsequently. An artist, Brett Bailey, I think it was, he painted, he did a painting of Jacob Zuma with his dingus, his junk hanging out. And it was a provocative painting. We supported the Goodman Gallery in showing that painting, in exhibiting that painting. But now it seems that, in essence, what the Goodman Gallery wants to do is use any excuse to be anti-Black and anti-Global South. If you look at the names up on the Goodman Gallery today, they're all white. So, yeah. Goodman Gallery. If you or anybody related to your so-called gallery, I wouldn't call it a gallery, I would call it a colonial mouthpiece. So yeah, if any of you are listening, y'all are supporting genocide. Y'all are complicit in genocide. Hey, welcome on Twitch. So yeah, the Goodman Gallery is supporting the genocide of the Palestinian people. And so that is where we were today. People yelled at us about flying the Palestinian flag, and we just called them colonizers. Thank you. My birthday is next week, Wednesday. I'm saving up money for my birthday so I can do something special for myself. I want to get a tattoo. But I'm also, I saved up for a tattoo. But I also just want to do something special for my birthday, especially seeing as though I was fired because of someone on this app. So yeah. We have a goal today of 90. The links are in the link tree. The pay links, the coffee and Ko-Fi or whatever it's called, and the pal of pays. It's all in the link tree. And remember, I do these readings for free, so please do support in any way you can. And we are back to reading Abolition, Feminism Now, over here on Twitch and YouTube, and behind me here on TikTok. We are on chapter 1. Now, in the introduction, the 4 writers, Angela Davis, Gina Dent, Erica Mayners, and Beth E. Richie, they explained how feminism and abolitionism are interlinked, and how they're not diametrically opposed, as one would think, and why these two movements, prison abolition, and feminism, how they don't only interlink with each other, but how they kind of depend on each other. And so now we get into Abolition, Chapter 1. If you are following with the book, you can find it on my server. And you can, if you also have a copy, you can follow. We are on Chapter 1, page 29. It opens with an illustration of Marielle Presente, a poster from the ongoing struggle against the far right in Brazil by Lucienne Fortuna, Marielle Franco Instituto collection. And now this is a silhouette of Marielle. When the New York Women's House of Detention opened in 1932, it was heralded as a national model, an important example of modern penology. Prison. Located in Greenwich Village, where 6th Avenue, 10th Street, and Greenwich Avenue intersect, and constructed at a cost of $2 million. This was back in 1932. That was a fuck ton of money. This new prison was designed to address the increasing number of women entering the criminal legal system. News coverage emphasized a pivotal shift in the official vocabulary, mandating that the women incarcerated be referred to as inmates instead of prisoners, thus marking what were considered at the time to be significant reforms. Prison reform. It's impossible. The Women's House of Detention was also praised for incorporation of emergent scientific research, particularly the practice of carceral isolation, as a response to the assumption that one of the leading causes of crime was the ease with which young offenders became influenced by older lawbreakers in prison. The fuck? In what has become a familiar echo, building an innovative new prison with the best emerging science was framed as the necessary and most developed idea of reform. That to me is disgusting. Because if you want to understand closed systems and the structure, the like physical structures of colonial thought, of white supremacist thought, and all of that, read Foucault, Michel-Michel Foucault. Yet, despite the prison's goal of isolation, its nearness to the street and the core of the city created tangible pathways for communication and exchange. Visitations by people inhabiting the quote-unquote free world were not always confined to officially sanctioned meetings inside the prison via telephone and through the small and eventually degraded plexiglass panes, which required both parties to remain standing for the duration of the visit. There were also decidedly unsanctioned street visits, during which people screamed up from Greenwich Avenue, calling upon anyone inside who happened to be listening to ask the person they wanted to visit to come to their window. Audre Lorde described this communication strategy in 1982. Information and endearments flew up and down, the conversants apparently oblivious to the ears of the passers-by as they discussed the availability of lawyers, the length of stay, family, conditions, and the undying quality of true love. The Women's House of Detention, right smack in the middle of the village, always felt like one up for our side, a defiant pocket of female resistance, ever present as a reminder of possibility as well as punishment. Yes. Foucault's commentary on the panopticon, incredibly important for us to understand, especially as people who are, I think majority of us who are in these spaces are in some way, shape or form anarchist. And it's important for us to understand as anarchists how governance works and how it can work and the possibilities of governance rather than government. Because this is where government leads us. We need governance. We need not individualized, that is the wrong word. That is completely the wrong word. We need individual systems for each trade, for each issue of society, like how NGOs focus on one issue. We need governance of people who are experts in those fields working to govern those aspects of society. That is essentially what anarchism is that we don't need supreme leaders who claim to be anointed by God to rule. We need the people who know about the stuff to be elected by the people in the know about the stuff to run the stuff. And why I say this in relation to prison is if we focused more on restorative justice than punitive justice, how much further could we get as a society? If we focused more on community policing. Hayati, I will break my neck running to the US so fast to support you. I will walk on water. You know I will. Because its proximity to the street provided access to communication that was unregulated and, to a great extent, unsurveilled by the prison, it created conduits for organizing, and that is why I mentioned it. In creating a spectacle of so-called errant women in the middle of a city, showing this is what happens to women who break the rules. And I'm not going to say the laws. I'm going to say the rules. If they can make a spectacle of this is what happens, putting that prison in the middle of a city, then what can happen is that can be turned on its head. The structure of the city, the way in which that city is either managed or mismanaged, or the prison is situated within that city, people can resist. People can resist the spectacle. People can resist the punishment aspect and turn it into a space of organizing. Any space that is made for colonial violence, for white supremacist violence, for capitalist violence, for gender-based violence, it can be used for the opposite. Because we can reclaim those spaces. Just like we can reclaim language. Just like the oppressor co-opts language. Have you ever wondered why there's a brand of jeans, really expensive denim jeans, called Soviet? Because they were they were trying to neutralize the word Soviet. They were trying to lessen the threat. They were trying to normalize it as a consumerist thing. We can do the same. Like they can co-opt our language and call us woke as an insult. We can co-opt their spaces. And that's what protest is about. And that is why I am livid that I am livid that churches are considered private property in the US because they don't pay tax. They should not be able to be private places private spaces. You should be able to protest in a church. And I agree with one. I'm livid at the fact that, is it 3 or 4 now, Black American journalists have been arrested under this administration. I think it's 4. I miss you, Erica. We need to catch up. However temporal and fractured, inside and outside organizers found ways to interrupt and destabilize the prison's regimes of isolation. In 1969, during the days between Christmas and New Year, the emergent Gay Liberation Front protested for 24 hours a day in front of the prison in response to the incarceration of Afeni Shakur and Joan Bird, 2 Black Panthers whose cases attracted substantial media attention. During this time, Angela Davis spent in the House of D, as it was nicknamed. Supporters helped to organize a bail campaign that was coordinated in part through this unregulated communication between the incarcerated and the street. Prefiguring the Black Mamas Bailout Action Campaign initiated in 2017 by Mary Hooks of Southerners on New Ground, SONG, those on the outside raised money for bail, and women on the inside collectively decided who would benefit from the bail campaign. There were women who spent months behind bars, even though their charges were relatively minor, because they and their family members outside had few or no resources. And this is one of the many reasons that policing is racist, that the justice system is racist, that the carceral system is racist. From their perspective, a bail set at $500 might as well have been $500,000. The organizing and collective decision-making among the imprisoned was especially important because those who got out on bail committed to raise funds for the bail campaign after their release. While the mission of isolation was supported by what was presented as scientific evidence, literally concretizing the modern penology that the House of D symbolized, the history of this institution was always characterized by resistance. And I love that a space in the middle of the city that was meant to be a show of power became a show of resistance, became a site of resistance. The collective practices established by people inside and outside emerged from the tools and resources at hand: voices, people, raising money. While not explicitly named as abolitionist or even feminist, these collective practices are nevertheless important elements of the genealogy of abolition feminism. While bail funds had been created for political prisoners like H. Rap Brown, most incarcerated people didn't have access to these networks. However, as far as we can determine, the campaign at the House of D was one of the earliest instances of bail campaigns for people with no public profile. Like the contemporary Black Mamas Bailout Action and the emergence of the grassroots bail bonds funds across the United States. And FYI, there are quite a few people who donate their TikTok proceeds to bail funds for people who are incarcerated, one of them including Geeky. So if you don't follow Geeky rules, please do. And yeah, a lot of their TikTok money goes towards bailing out people who have been wrongly incarcerated. On the page here, on page 32, you can see the Black Mamas Bailout Action poster from 2019. The image was designed by Mickey Jordan for Mother's Day in 2019, and you can see it on the PDF, saying, until we abolish money bail, we're going to free ourselves. And this was by the Southerners on New Ground group, or SONG. The establishment of bail funds The communication networks developed from shouting up to cell windows from the street, and the willful and collective refusal by those inside and out to acquiesce in isolation enacted by the prison constituted a powerful early abolition feminist intervention. Current efforts to abolish bail altogether, such as the 2020 announcement by San Francisco District Attorney Chesa Boudin, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, that his office was terminating cash bail, owe a great deal to these earlier abolition feminist efforts. Thank you. It's next week, Wednesday, so it's birthday week. Well, almost. It's birthday month. In 1974, the population of the Women's House of Detention was moved to Rikers Island Prison. The House of D was demolished. Joan Nessel suggests that imprisoned women's persistent interruption to the daily life of Greenwich Village streets was considered bad for real estate and tourism, eventually prompted the mayor to close the prison. After significant organizing, a garden created on the former site of the House of D. A garden was created, on the former site of the House of D. These rich organizing histories have been largely scrubbed from abolitionist movement histories. Yet the emptiness of the 1932 argument for modern penology echoes in contemporary calls to create so-called kinder, nicer jails across the US, particularly in New York City, during struggles over an alternative plan to now delegitimized Rikers Island Prison. Can somebody who knows about Rikers Island please tell me more about it? Because I need to read more. Because I have heard a lot about the place being bad. Let's just put it quite simply. So if anybody does know about Rikers Island, please drop me a message. Tell me about it. Because I want to know from a leftist perspective especially. Because I don't want to trust the people who write for the official websites. Why are you chewing on your foot? My cat is chewing on her foot. Also, my knee is fucked because I walked a lot today. And please tell me if the fan that is behind me is bothersome to the audio. I really need that fan on. It's too hot in here. San Francisco, Denver, Bellingham, Los Angeles, and many other cities and counties are organizing against and sometimes successfully defeating proposed new jail and prison constructions, expansions, and associating financing schemes. Yeah, I just hear that, like, a lot of places, like, we hear horror stories from prisons and stuff, especially psychiatric prisons, especially across the US, because in the US it was legal to use torture methods. It was, right up until the 1980s, it was legal to use torture methods that were banned under the Trick Geneva Convention. To treat psychiatric patients who were committed. Inconceivable to Many, even 10 years ago, jail closure, the elimination of money bond, clemency, and what they called compassionate release are now debated in mainstream media outlets such as the Washington Post and lauded in progressive public policy forums as examples of necessary change. These ideological and material shifts represent enormous gains. Yet, an abolition feminist lens teaches us that our work is not simply about winning specific campaigns, but reframing the terrain upon which struggle for freedom happens. And that's important. Because we cannot just hope to have all of these small wins be enough. As these authors said in the introduction, it's yes and. Yes, we need to address immediate needs, and we need to work towards the longer term goal of complete abolition of the prison industrial complex of the US. Indeed, one of the fundamental precepts of abolition is that winning a campaign is not only the measure of success, it's how we struggle, how our work enables future struggles, and how we stay clear about what we are fighting for and why it matters. Working from the snapshot of a generative analysis and histories of people organizing for liberation around and within the House of Detention, this chapter offers one pathway for thinking about how abolitionist practice was shaped by feminism. Incorporating the organizational formation of the critical resistance and other networks that built contemporary abolitionist movements, the influence of the historical insights of W.E.B. Du Bois. I always used to say Du Bois, by the way, until I was corrected by somebody who is part of the library that shows his original handwritten manuscripts. It's like, no, it's Du Bois. He called himself Du Bois. And analysis from contemporary campaigns. This chapter traces the feminist through lines propelling abolitionist practice. Today, as always, it is crucial to highlight these forms of organizing in a genealogy of abolition and feminism. Now, when you look at how the prison and carceral system in general was intended to be used, you can understand why it's a broken system. You can understand why it's a system that does not champion racial equality. Not only is punitive justice an absolute waste of time, a for-profit system that uses black and brown bodies as free labor is a continuation of slavery. It's a continuation of enslavement in the form of stealing people's lives from them. It is a continuation of slavery in stealing people's energy, stealing people's time, stealing people's hearts, stealing people's families from them. How is that not slavery? How is that not stealing a person, trafficking a person from one continent to another, placing them in chains for 18 hours a day? How is it different? How is the prison industrial complex any different? Especially when it targets black and brown bodies the most. Especially when a white person can commit a crime And somebody will say, no, they were black. And every black person becomes a suspect. How is it not slavery? So we get to page 34, organizing genealogies. 3 years before the demolition of the House of D, the Attica brothers issued a 1971 passionate call for abolition during a 4-day rebellion that echoed across various movements and activist circles. In the wake of the Attica uprising, numerous examples of the beginnings of counter-hegemonic discourse surfaced, such as the uprising at Walpole Prison in Massachusetts. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Sorry, I had to check a message. Where incarcerated people organized a labor union in a prison and ran the prison. Even as this momentum was unfortunately soon hindered by the reigning law and order rhetoric, the American Friends Service Committee published Struggle for Justice, a report on crime and punishment in America. The concluding section of this report emphasized, among other issues, opposition to the construction of new prisons. The report argued that, as a reform, modern prisons may relieve the harsher physical hardships of doing time, but the essential punitive element of prison, deprivation of liberty and free choice, remains. When pressures for reform lead to demands to relieve overcrowding by adding a new cell or bed space, the result is inevitable. The coercive net of the justice system will be spread over a larger number of people, entrapping them for longer periods of time. If prisons are overcrowded, ways should be found to cut back the mass of criminal laws and the types of enforcement that send so many people to prison. The construction of new prisons is not compatible with our view of the proper role of criminal law in any democratic society. Restorative justice is what is necessary. Not a single arrest has been made relating to the Epstein files. Not one. And that sentient pumpkin is still the US president. My deepest apologies to pumpkins. It's not targeting the worst. There are people in prison in there for possessing weed. There are people in there for years for killing their rapists. Cyntoia Brown. Remember that name. The 1976 Handbook for Abolitionists Instead of Prisons, likewise, clearly outlines strategies for the decarceration and documented and abbreviated history of abolitionist analysis, with more than a century of citations from incarcerated and free individuals as well as organizations. The handbook cited Judge Bruce M. Wright, who eventually served on the New York State Supreme Court, who visited Greenhaven Prison in 1975. Quote, "For years I have condemned the prisons of America. I have always said that the prison system as it exists in America today should be abolished. As I have grown older, I have seen no reason to change that view." Unquote. Instead of Prisons was co-authored by the Quaker activist Faye Honey Knopp, a groundbreaking 20th century abolitionist who later argued that abolition was a significant dimension of radical feminism. These ideas were taken up in the 70s by the Santa Cruz Women's Prison Project, which worked to create a vibrant community of people inside and outside prisons along the West Coast by hosting discussions on alternatives to prison, circulating newsletters with shared updates and analyses, creating support networks for people inside and after release, and generating sustained campaigns to halt construction of new jails and prisons. These contributions to the counter-hegemonic discourse that emerged after Attica reveal a necessary core of abolition feminism already present in past efforts. Abolition has always been feminist. Feminist movements need to support abolition. And if feminist movements do not support prison abolition, sorry to say, your feminism is not inclusive. Your feminism is racist. Abolitionist ideas about democracy, freedom, safety, and justice continued to percolate through the following decades, even as demands for substantive reform gave way to calls for increasingly punitive strategies, often couched in the very reforms designed to render incarceration more humane. There is no such thing as humane incarceration. Almost 25 years later, after the demolition of the House of D, when the establishment of these early site-specific forms of resistance, including grassroots bail funds, which were largely forgotten, abolition was an idea revivified by the 1998 conference, Critical Resistance, Beyond the Prison Industrial Complex. It's not easy to go out and do the activism that I'm not going to say we all should be doing, that we all can be doing, I should say. That we all have available to us outside of our homes. It's not easy, especially as people of the global majority. Black, Indigenous, and people of the global majority. Stay safe. But just know that should you be in a position to be able to do that kind of work, the resources are there. The resources are in the form of these kinds of movements, conferences, weekly meetings, zines, organizing committees for single issues. Drawing from earlier lineages, this convening offered abolitionism as a 21st century strategy for addressing not only the staggering rise in the numbers of incarcerated people across the US, but also increasingly in Europe, Australia, Africa, and South America. And all over, it was the increasing number of Black and brown people who were incarcerated. Because what better way for a racist state to get to exercise control over a population that it hates than to lock them away? The increase in arrests and sentencing, long sentencing of Black and brown people started, when white Australians' right to hunt Indigenous people ended. FYI. In the fall of 1996, Cassandra Shaler, then a graduate student in history of consciousness at UC Santa Cruz and an attorney for incarcerated women, and Angela Davis, faculty member at the department, first discussed the possibility of organizing a conference that would bring people together to develop radical anti-prison organizing strategies. In order to avoid exceptionalizing those who could not afford to pay, admission to the conference was free, and additional funds were raised to support travel for formerly incarcerated people. It's worth noting that of the 28 members of the organizing committee, all except 5 were women or non-binary. Originally, organizers of the conference assumed that they were being optimistic in expectations that several hundred activists from around the country could be persuaded to attend. However, by the time the actual conference took place in September 1998 at the University of California, Berkeley, some 3,500 were in attendance. This gathering marked the beginning of an entirely new phase of anti-prison activism. It consolidated a major organizing presence, highlighting abolitionist approaches in cities like Oakland, New York, Chicago, New Orleans, Los Angeles, and Portland, that involved work such as systematically challenging the construction of new prisons and promoting decarceration strategies. The group worked with educators to develop campaigns around such demands as schools, not jails, and education, not incarceration. 2.5 years later, in May 2001, Critical Resistance was established as a national organization, with Rose Braz as the campaign and media director. Today, more than 2 decades of protests, campaigns, advocacy, and movement building. After more than 2 decades, Critical Resistance has not only helped to direct public attention towards the prison crisis, but mobilized a wide swathe of organizers who shifted the discourse away from liberal demands for prison reform toward prison abolition, recognizing that the same logic applies to the structures of policing and other carceral formations. And that's important. All of these are colonial systems, and every single colonial system needs to fall. By the way, if you don't know what this means, please look it up. The word TSEK, pronounced tsek. As a key moment in the history and genealogy of abolition, the convening marked the beginning of a movement philosophically anchored by the notion of abolition with strong feminist inflections. The Critical Resistance Conference created a pathway for multiple other gatherings that propelled the idea of abolition. Some of these, too many to chronicle, were singular events. For example, the 2007 conference, Transforming Justice, Ending the Criminalization and Imprisonment of Transgender and Gender Nonconforming People, organized and sponsored by the Transgender, Gender Variant, and Intersex Justice Project, the Sylvia Rivera Law Project, Critical Resistance, and other organizations. Exactly, Saintless. Or, as we say during protests, pansy. To most of you in here who are some sort of gender non-conforming, gender variant, or gender non-concerned people, I'd say gender variant, find out if the Transgender, Gender Variant, and Intersex Justice Project operates in your area. I like that term, gender variant. Gender non-concerned, yeah. It's not a priority for me. Gender is not a priority. So I'm gender non-concerned. Yeah, the Transgender, Gender Variant, and Intersex Justice Project is a really good organization to be part of, even if you just receive news from them. Demonstrated what analysis of the prison industrial complex that failed to account for queer and trans resistance and are incomplete and inadequate. You notice a lot of queer stories come out of prisons. There's a lot of research as to why. Other gatherings became yearly opportunities for assessment integral to movement building, long-term movement building. In March 2020, the 10th annual Beyond the Bars conference took place in New York. Freedom Plans, Strategies for Challenging a Carceral Society, organized by a network of formerly incarcerated people, led by Kathy Boudin and Cheryl Wilkins. Yet other meetings shaped new organizations. The 2011 abolitionist organization, Students Against Mass Incarceration, was founded at Howard University during the unfortunately unsuccessful campaign to save Troy Davis from the death penalty. Rest in power. After holding a national conference in 2013, drawing students from historically black colleges and universities like Morgan State, numerous campus-based campaigns emerged, such as the movement demanding divestment from private prisons. Critical resistance popularized radical analyses of the ways in which imprisonment and policing, firmly linked to developments in global capitalism, simultaneously incorporate masked structural racism. We've been saying this. Now, mind you, my mother hates tattoos, to the point where when she asked me what I wanted for my birthday and I said, give me money towards my birthday tattoo, she said no. I wasn't allowed to get a tattoo as long as I lived under her roof, because my mother is that strict about those kinds of things. She was like, yeah, it's your body. It's my house. That was the one thing. She was like, you can do drugs in here. Just don't get tattoos. And I wasn't going to cross that boundary. I was like, okay, fine. Whatevs. I have the rest of my life to do it. When my mother first heard the term ACAB, she said, yeah, that's something I would get a tattoo of. It's adorable, actually, how anti-police my mother is. Like, actually, it's terrifying, but it's also adorable, because you would never think that somebody who looks like my mother would be so insanely political. She would try to feed you, and then she'll, like, deconstruct your entire theory of your politics with you, and, like, break it down piece by piece. She's incredible. And she's the first one who taught me that the prison system is flawed, that policing is corrupt, that the systems that we hold as normal are racist, sexist, and inherently for the profit of the few. She's kind of the person who made me abolitionist more than feminist. It was my teachers who kind of lead me towards my feminism, my teachers and mentors who guided my feminism more than my mother did. My mother guided my abolition far stronger than she guided my feminism. This abolitionist movement sought to explain the tremendous increase in the numbers of imprisoned people during the 80s in relation to the structural changes produced by the rise of global capitalism during that period. The deindustrialization of the US economy, which led to the elimination of vast numbers of jobs, especially in heavy manufacturing like steel, auto, and mining, had a devastating impact on black communities in cities like Detroit, LA, Philadelphia, and Chicago. Because of the rise of global capitalism, it also involved neoliberal strategies to disestablish services associated with welfare states. Unemployed people lost any vestiges of safety nets. Instead of directly addressing problems created by structural shifts in the economy, the stopgap, quote-unquote, solution of punishment consolidated the link between racism and criminalization. So instead of actually helping communities through sudden unemployment with the deindustrialization of US society, the US doesn't make anything. Just by the way. You know, when people say, oh my God, I'm turning into my mother, and they say it as a bad thing, if I'm ever told that I'm turning into my mother, if I become half the person that my mother is, I would consider myself a success. Yeah, the US is a service economy. And not only a service economy, but a consumer economy. An absolute consumer economy. Also, if you are, like me, boycotting Coca-Cola, I don't know if this is South African or... Yeah, the writing is way too small. This is called Bashes. I love it. AI will take white-collar service jobs. And then white people will blame immigrants for AI taking their jobs. Poor white people will blame black and brown folk for AI taking their jobs. Yeah, I got told, like, I'm by no means elitist about what you do for capitalism. Like, I don't care what you do. Just be a damn good person, you know? I don't make the distinction between white collar and blue collar. I fucking hate it. The term blue collar is used to justify fucking below minimum wage. The world over. But when somebody who has a high school diploma and nothing else, who works at Walmart, will tell me that I'm coming to the US to steal their job, I'm like, no, honey, you're not going to be a university professor. Look at what jobs the immigrants are doing. It's either highly educated people going into jobs that they got a visa for because they are highly educated and have qualifications that are in demand in the US, or they're doing jobs that white US citizens don't want to do. Thank you, Hannah. Like, immigrants are not stealing your jobs. Anyway, I went off on a little bit of a tangent there. I'm going to read for about 10 more minutes. Less, I think. It is 23:23. Make a wish. These movements were also shaped by organizing, especially by black feminists, that continue to illuminate the punishing power of state programs marked as welfare and other services. The existing welfare program, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, was associated within popular discourse with black women, even as the majority of recipients were white. The myth of the black welfare queen created an easy target and was a pivotal discursive strategy that held women responsible for criminal behavior in the punitive misuse of welfare funds and as generators of a culture of crime that would be largely perpetuated by their male children. As Dorothy Roberts documented in Killing the Black Body, first published in 1997, a persistent objective of American social policy has been to monitor and restrain this corrupting tendency of black motherhood. Although child and family services are often misconceived as soft forms of surveillance and policing, what Roberts has called the family regulation system, and more recently, the family policing system, is directly weaponized against poor family, proportionately black and indigenous women. Far from a kind and just parent, state intervention results in grotesque outcomes for families, particularly young folk. What differentiates this explicitly abolitionist approach from prevailing ideas and scenarios addressing prison repression, both then and now? It is the tenacious critique from prison reform and of criminal justice reform more broadly, as well as recognition that the ideological impulse to contain all efforts to address social damage wrought by prisons within the parameters of reform serves to further authorize incarceration as legitimate, the immutable foundation of justice. Like, oh, that person needs to go to jail. Go under the jail. Oh, no. No. I don't want prisons. I want reformative justice. I find punitive justice performative justice. Damn, Sam, go start your own life. Abolitionist organizing recognized there are no easy reformist solutions to the hegemonic notion that indigenous and black people, other people of color, poor people, trans people, and women of all racial backgrounds who do not conform to dominant gender expectations were naturally inclined to criminality and belong in prison. An amalgam of economic, political, cultural, and representational forces produces this fatal normal. Politicians were winning elections by exploiting the notion of law and order and perverting definitions of safety. Media outlets were supporting these ideas for their own benefit, and corporations were profiting from service to prisons and cheap prison labor. The field of prison architecture was expanding, as telephone companies were developing lucrative contracts with correctional agencies, and as the construction industry itself was thriving as a result of the jails and prisons being built. Moreover, gender violence was increasingly conceptualized as just another crime to be addressed within law and order, within this framework, and by emerging victims' rights movements supported by conservative legislators. So conservative legislators have used women's rights as a cudgel to further entrench white supremacy, patriarchy, and capitalism. They abuse our narratives. They abuse our stories. They abuse us in the process of trying to further their agendas. The same conditions that were responsible for the economic and racial issues that drove the prison boom in the US were also responsible for ruining local economies in the global south, and therefore driving increased migration, particularly to the US, especially from the areas of the world subject to structural adjustment according to the demands of international finance capital. The more people extracted from the global south, the more the global south began to rely on the US. And I find it hilarious that just as I mention immigration, Manuel comes in. Hi, Manuel. Immigrant detention facilities, many of them owned and operated by private prison companies, further consolidated strategies of what is now referred to as mass incarceration. Abolition's reorientation and revitalization as a philosophical and activist tradition in the context of intensifying state violence makes it possible to understand that reforms would not make visible or eliminate any of these structural conditions. And that is where I will stop for today. Any questions? Another one finished. My page tabs. But wait! Do I have more? Do I have more? I should have more. I do. Remember, I do these readings for free, so please, if you can, donate to my Tippy Tip goal. It is a rainbow. My Tippity Tip goal is here with the pay links in my link tree. And with it, I'm probably going to buy more page tabs, because I like page tabs. It keeps my brain organized. Sometimes colorful thingies is the only way I can keep my brain organized. Okay, so I'm going to say goodnight to Discord. And a very good night to those of you on YouTube and Twitch. I shall see you all on Tuesday. And if you want to join my server, please go to the link in my Tiki-Taki bio. And you can join my server there. You can also see my pay links if you want to donate towards my birthday fund, which is still sitting at 90 for today. Yeah, I can never get this webcam right. Yeah, you can go to my pay links and the Discord and the everything. And yeah, drink water, take your meds, eat something, smash the motherfucking patriarchy, eat all the white men, and if you don't eat meat, compost them. And remember to be kind, especially to yourselves, because everybody deserves kindness. I'm going to stay on the Tiki-Taki for a few minutes longer and chat to some people. But I will be back to Twitch and the YouTube on Tuesday, which is the day before my birthday. And yes, I love my birthday, before you ask. I think you figured that out by now. Alrighty, see you next week.